Welcome back to the Aussie Shed, ladies and gentlemen, for another episode of Project Fairlady. So as promised, folks, what we've got on the board today is we are going to be modifying the compressor covers on both the left and right hand side turbochargers. The reason being, both the turbos are aftermarket Garrett GT 2860 RS turbos, and they have standard style compressor covers on them, and they don't really fit with the layout of the vehicle, as was pretty apparent in the teardown video of how the piping had been run and all the problems that there were associated with it. So now's the time to correct all that stuff and make everything 100%. So we're going to start on the driver's side compressor cover right here. So let's go and have a little bit of a look at what we're going to do. So where the issue, folks, is in this area right here. If you remember on the teardown video, there was a piece welded onto the front of this turbo here on the compressor cover, and it was part of a donut that had been sort of welded on and was just basically turned in and sort of up, but they couldn't get the proper angle with it because it just sort of doesn't work that way. And they'd attempted to secure a piece of the original intake piping to it, which didn't work. It tore, and it wasn't mounted properly on there, so this turbo was just sucking in dust and dirt and crap probably its whole life on the vehicle. I've since cut that fabricated donut piece off the front of the turbo. I'm not sure if this is the same compressor cover. I've mixed them up, you know, but there was no sign of which one had been done. Could actually be this one. It came off pretty cleanly. But what I'm going to do, folks, is I'm going to actually cut this right back to the front here. So this whole snout area is going to go, and then I'm going to be welding on some cast pieces on there. And what I've actually got to do is make a reducing corkscrew that goes onto here, goes from 3" to 2.5", and then twists like a corkscrew so that I come up in the right place. The reason I have to cut it back is there's a dip in the exhaust manifold here, and there's no way to get enough clearance to be able to do this and get past that, because the edge of this compressor cover actually goes up a lot higher than this dip is here, which is part of the problem with their initial piece that they had welded on there. They just couldn't work out how to get around this, you know, and they tried to do it in one piece, whereas for a start it needs to be done in a corkscrew fashion. You can't just put a bend on there and get back up out of here. All of this is due to having this style of compressor cover on these turbos too, folks. If they had the 2-bolt bolt-on flange type on the front of them, which are available for these turbos, you wouldn't have this problem. It would be much easier to get around, and I think you could probably even adapt the factory piping to that fairly successfully. Regardless, we're not going to be using any of the factory piping anyway, so we may as well modify it in a way that's going to actually work with what I'm going to build. I'll grab the pieces and I'll show you what I'm going to do before I go cutting the compressor cover off. So what I've got here, folks, this is a reducing cast 90-degree bend. So starts off as 3", ends up as 2.5. I've actually already cut this. There was a piece that came off here in the 3", probably about that far. You know, just like this piece does here. I've already cut that back, and I've actually cut it on a slight angle to help me with the clearance issues that I need here. So what I'm going to do, folks, is we're going to corkscrew this, which means we're going to twist it around so that it ends up somewhere like that. And so you can see on the inside there, it just sort of now corkscrews. It's all really clear and really smooth. There's nothing wrong with doing this. It just creates this sort of style of bend. Now, when you're planning this sort of a cut, particularly on a reducing bend, you have to put it at the right angle in the right spot, or when you rotate it around, it's going to end up all wonky, you know. So fortunately with this, I've planned it out correctly, and I can rotate it fairly freely, and it doesn't go off anywhere. It doesn't end up, you know, sort of being proud on one side and short on the other, and not being able to get it to line up properly. So yeah, plan your bends, folks, when you're cutting them. And so this is what we're going to do. We want to end up something roughly something like that, I think, so that we sort of go down down slightly, and then we sort of turn up. So there I am, somewhere like that anyway, folks. My arm's probably in the way, but we end up with something like this that actually clears, and we can get a pipe on properly, and sort of comes up where we want. As you can see, I'm hitting up against the exhaust manifold there, and I'm not in line with the top of the turbo. And for a start, I'd want clearance, and this is the reason why I have to cut the front of the turbo compressor housing back there to get me past this hump that sits down, so that I can then sort of freely rotate this and have clearance where I need it to make it all sort of work. So what I'm going to do, folks, I'm going to get that compressor cover off, cut it, get it back on, and then I'm going to mark this bend, and we're going to start setting this up and tacking it and welding it, and getting it sort of all organized. So first thing I'll do, I'll get that off and I'll get it onto the bench. So I'll see you at the bench. And here it is, folks. So as I say, we're going to cut the front of this off. I'll probably just leave it a mil or two up there so I can use that to sort of locate it, but I want to cut this back as far as I can. You can see the tapered section inside the turbo there doesn't begin till after that point, so we're not affecting anything. We're just taking off this round section here, which, like I say, we're going to be replacing that with the round section on the cast piece that we're putting on there. But you can see I've already been sort of at this, cleaning it up a bit inside, because it was a pretty daggy casting, really. I don't know whether they've improved the casting on these. I'm sure they would have. This is probably a 10-year-old turbo, I reckon, at least. Yeah, it was pretty daggy looking. So I don't know how we're going to cut this off. I think I'll go and experiment, folks. I'll head over to the bandsaws, and I'll see if there's a particular way that's going to make it easy to cut this off, so we don't have to use a handheld tool like a grinder or something, So let's head over to the saws. Hey, alrighty. Well, that, folks, was a huge pain in the ass to do. I just couldn't hold it properly in my bandsaw, and as a result, it's not very flat, that cut. So what I think I might do is mount this on my drill press and just throw a milling cutter in it and just kind of mill this flat, because it is quite wonky. So I think I just really need to do that before I start doing anything. So I'll do that, folks. I'll be back. And there we go, folks. It is now flat, which is fantastic. At least I've got something decent to go off with my my first piece of casting that I'm going to be welding onto there. So the next step is to get this back onto the vehicle, so that we can judge now how far back we are, and we can put some marks to line up our first section. And we will then weld the first piece on, or tack the first piece on, get the second piece on, probably tack it, and then just weld the whole lot up. So let's get this back on the car, eh? So that's sitting back on there, folks, just loosely, so I can sort of have a bit of a fiddle with it. And here's my my piece. I can sort of rotate. So now I've just got to work out what is the right angle for this. So a little bit of trial and error, and we should be able to sort this out. I think that's going to be it, folks. It's a little bit tricky. Right, let's get it off and weld this first section on. Alrighty. So, somewhere like that. So I'll just check that, folks, and if it's all good, we'll weld her up. There we go. It's going to make it awfully hard to get this compressor cover on and off. Anyway, doesn't matter, folks, it doesn't matter. Right there. We might have to use a little bit of tape on this. Yeah, that'll be alright. That'll be fine. So I think that's it, folks. That seems to be our shape. See, looking down in there, nothing, you know, there's no harsh turns or anything about it. It's very smooth, really. But yeah, that's what we end up with, folks. Obviously, having a bolt-on thing on the front here would make it easier for assembly and disassembly, but honestly, I just couldn't be bothered. That may come back to bite me in the bum at some time, but at this stage, mate, once the turbo's on, the turbo's on. It's not really coming off, and if it does, well, you know, it's not really that big a deal. If I had to struggle on my back on the lawn somewhere, you know, underneath the car to do stuff, it'd be a problem, but having the hoist there, you know, if something's a bit awkward, well, that's just the way it is. Anyway, I'm just making excuses for myself, making excuses for my own bloody laziness. But, you know, it does need to be very compact in that situation. So, actually, there you go. You can see a big wear mark from something. I don't know what that's from. Huh. No idea. Anyway, folks, I'll weld this up. I won't do it on camera. I'll weld this up and I'll show you what it looks like when it's finished. So, I'll be back. And there we go, folks. She's all done now. Not the prettiest thing I've ever done, but very, very functional. It's always a little bit on the tough side, welding car stuff. It just never seems to do what you want it to do, you know. But the main thing is, the inside is beautiful, and that's what we want. So there you go, folks. A reducing corkscrew on the compressor inlet. Now, I don't know if I'm actually going to be able to get this on with the turbo in position. I'll have a look. If I can't, I won't worry about it, and we'll move on to the next turbo, which is the passenger side, and we're going to be probably cutting off the outlet and welding a 90 on there to get us up to a better position, to either get a silicone joiner on it or get another bit of pipe on there. But we will see, because we have to come out. How does it sit? It sits on the side like that, I think, so we've got to come up, but we don't have the room, so we've got to cut this back before we put the piece on. I think that's what this piece is here for. Obviously not this compressor housing, because this one's done, but the one on the other side, I'm pretty sure we've got to cut that back to there somewhere at least, maybe even shorter, maybe cut it off here and off here. We'll see when we get it off, folks. Weld them together and possibly weld that on a 45, so we get a little bit of a bit of flow coming this way. Anyway, see if we can get this on. If not, we'll start looking at the other side. So this is the issue with the passenger side turbo, folks. You can see that it points straight into the rail here, and even though there is a gap and you could fit a silicone joiner on there, it takes up pretty much the whole area. This is a tight radius 2-inch cast bend. Now, it's pretty much an identical shape to a 2-inch silicone joiner. The silicone joiner is actually slightly bigger. And you can see in that situation there, that only just fits. Like, you can imagine if that was a joiner and you'd have to slide it on and get a clamp on it, it's still actually going to rub on the chassis rail. And as I say, a silicone joiner is actually bigger than that, so it makes sense to me to just cut that cast bend back in line with the edge, cut the end off the turbo, and basically bring it up on a 45-degree angle, you know, about there. So, or obviously down lower in line with the turbo, but on about that line there. So you end up with, you know, sort of that much clearance between the chassis rail and the edge of the turbo, which will be this bend when it's welded on. It's real easy to do, and for me it's just a better job. And I particularly hate using silicone joins on bends, like using elbows. I try to, when I'm doing turbo piping, to only use silicone on straight sections and do all the bends in aluminium, and yeah, only use straights. And the main reason being that when your boost pressure's hitting a bend, it's really thumping into the back side of it. And if that's a silicone coupler, it's taking a lot of force constantly hitting it on the sides. And if there's any reason why it's not 100%, it's just going to work its way off. Whereas straight couplers are just straight through. There's no real force on the sides driving them apart. And often the pipe will be kind of fixed and the coupler will just be between them. So in order to get a straight joiner to blow off, you've actually got to blow the pipe out, and it'll usually hit something before that'll happen. Whereas an elbow will just kind of go like that, you know. So that's another reason why I don't want to do it. And those two things together is enough for me to definitely say, well, this is what I'm going to do. So I'll get that compressor cover off, folks. I might take the whole turbo off, I don't know. I'll see if I can do it from underneath. But I'll get it on the bench and we'll have a bit of a look at it. So that's it there, folks. Got a bit of mark, that's where I'm going to cut it off. There's my bend that I'm going to weld on there. Got a bit of mark on that as well. So they're obviously going to lap over at that point. So I'll get these cut. Do any die grinding if we need to, because this does taper a bit in here. And I'll tack them together and we'll do a bit of a test fit. That's what we've got now. So like I say, I'm probably going to put that on a 45 that way, you know, just because, make it easier. So I'll just flatten these off. They're a bit, you know, they're a bit not flat. I'll flatten them off and then I'll have a look at the insides. That does look pretty reasonable. Alright, I'll frig around with these, folks, and I'll tack them up and I'll give you a bit of a look. Just quickly before I weld this, folks, something I haven't really touched on is that anytime you have anything like this apart, never waste an opportunity to clean things up. Like, for example, this bend here. It's a pretty reasonable casting, but I always have a die grinder handy at the bench with a flat wheel on it, and it always pays to just run it through absolutely everything. You'd be surprised the lumps and bumps that you'll take off, and just what a really nice piece you'll end up with. Nothing escapes the die grinder either, folks. You can see the turbo's had a bit of a bash with it as well. There's a little bit of casting flash in there as well. You'll always find bits and pieces, and these are the little things that take almost no time, don't really cost you any money, but I think they really make a difference. Particularly to, well, my perceived quality of the job, you know. Like, if someone's put in the effort to do things like this, there's a good chance they probably put in effort in a lot of other areas as well. And you'd be surprised how bad a lot of things are when you get them and match them up. Like, when I cut this, for example, it was a lot fatter on one side than the other, so I've just attacked it with a flat wheel and a die grinder and just evened everything up. It's just sort of one of those things, folks. Once you start doing this kind of stuff, you just naturally, that's what you do all the time. Every time you pick something up, you're looking for irregularities, and you think nothing of just kind of cleaning stuff up, which is why I don't often mention things like that when I'm doing videos. Yeah, the cleaning up side of things, also preparation for welding. You can see I've knocked off the outside of the casting on this where I'm going to weld it. It's all been cleaned up. Same with the turbo. And it's also been wiped down with acetone, ready to go. Cleanliness is the key in welding, guys, particularly with stuff like this that's cast. You need absolutely everything on your side when you're trying to get a decent weld on stuff like this, you know. Alright, I'll get a couple of tacks on this and we'll fit it back up and see if it's going to work. There you go, folks. It's amazing how much better a decent casting makes it to weld. My welds almost look passable, but I probably pulled the wrong rein here. I was going to just tack it. Oh, I was going to just tack it and then put it on and check it, and I didn't. I just welded the whole thing up. I got all excited, folks. It was welding so nicely. I got all excited. Hopefully it's going to fit. If it doesn't, well, I'm in trouble, aren't I? It's alright, folks, you can stop worrying. It looks like it fits. So now, folks, all we need is a straight joiner on there and then some pipe, and we'll come up and along here, and whichever one of these we have to go into, you know, we're sort of good to go. We've got something good to start from. Same on the other side. You remember it's all good now. The inlet on this side takes a little bit of buggerizing around with, but we don't have the same problem that we have with the hump in the manifold that we had on the other side. I can actually get this one with a straight joiner and then a little bit of a bendy thing going on there. It's no big deal. But they were the main two issues: outlet on this side, inlet on the driver's side, and that's one more little job knocked over, folks. So I think we'll leave this video here, folks. I hope you enjoyed seeing what you sometimes have to do to make stuff to work. Pretty common thing, muck around with turbochargers in tight spaces, particularly with V configuration engines. Straight 6s, straight 4s and that, you've got a lot more space to work with, hence why, you know, the poor old VG30 has got such a bit of a bad reputation. But realistically, it was just a taste of things to come, folks. I've done a lot of work on 370Zs and 370 GTs, that whole platform, the VQ sort of platform, and I can tell you that they're actually harder and have less space when you start putting turbos and stuff in them to work on than the VG30 in the Z32. So at the time it was considered hard to work on, but by today's standard it really isn't that tough at all. Anyway, if you like the video, give it a thumbs up. Remember to subscribe to the Aussie Shed if you haven't done so already. Remember to leave a comment, even if you just pile and crap on me. I really don't care. And I'll bloody well see you on the next one. Cheers.